I'm Rebecca Ryan, and this is Futures Friday. This week, we're taking a complete business approach, business focus to Futures Friday. So I'm going to share some data that we've recently gathered about how business people are approaching the future. I'm going to share some insight I received when I was at the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives meeting in the questions that I was getting from leaders of these large business organizations, some large, some small, many visionary. So I'm going to just jump into it. So as always, we always start with a shout out, a merci, a congratulations. And this week, I'm going to give it to Sherree and Kelley and the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. They're coming out with a new tagline called Chambers Change Things. And I know that for some of you, you think of if you don't belong to a chamber, you're not active in a chamber, you may think of chambers of commerce as being sort of scary and partisan and whatnot. That is not the experience that you have with ACCE. These are top executives who are nonpartisan, who are always trying to put the community on their shoulders and figure out how they can drive more value for businesses in their communities. And results of polling that Sherree and Kelley and her team have done at ACCE over the years through the Harris poll have showed that businesses are now the most trusted organizations within their communities. So if we want to drive change in our communities, we want well-intentioned businesses to come on alongside of us. So congratulations to ACCE and their new tagline, which I think is going to roll out officially in September. The tagline is Chambers Change Things. And of course, we want brighter futures. So everyone is welcome. It's going to take all of us to build the futures that we want. All right, so that was the shout out. That was the congratulations for the week. This week, I'm not going to share one signal. I'm going to share 3 batches of signals, and they're all going to come with this lens of how businesses are thinking about the future. And I'm going to be honest, I'm experimenting with something this week, and that is Substack has just rolled out a share screen option. And sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words, and just looking at my face wagging its jaw might not be the most interesting thing. So let me share my screen. See how this is going to go here. All right. There we go. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, there we go. So just in terms of a little bit of perspective, and I'll drop the PDF that lists these forces and trends into the notes after today's Futures Friday. But last year, ACCE released Horizon 2035, and it was a lookout at the forces and trends that are going to impact the business community and chambers of commerce over the next 10 years. My firm was hired to help facilitate that process, and we were running very closely alongside ACCE and its task force to get Horizon 2035 off the ground. My colleague David Brown, former ACCE chair, life member of ACCE, he was instrumental. Thank you, David, for all your work on 2035 and on its predecessor, Horizon 2025. Long story short, what this report does, is it lays out these 11 forces and trends in 3 different categories and says, hey, business community, maybe not all of you are going to be affected by these 11 forces and trends, but some of you are going to be affected a lot. And in some cases, a lot of businesses are going to be affected somewhat. So I'll put the PDF in the show notes after Futures Friday wraps up. But what my team did after Horizon 2035 came out is we offered a workshop to chambers of commerce to say, hey, let's talk with your boards around how important these forces and trends are. So this is the collected data from what's happening with these boards. So of the 11, we did add a 12th. We added energy as a 12th force. Of those 12, you can see that there are 3 that every client said these are all high impact and high certainty, because we ask people to look at these forces and trends and discern, how likely is our business community to be impacted by these, and how much impact will they have? So we've got 3 that are high impact, high certainty. You see catalytic leadership. That is, Can the business community bring people together in a way that can help solve problems, help make the community an even better version of themselves? High certainty chamber leaders feel like we are increasingly being called to do this, and it's going to have a huge impact on our communities. Second one, digital transformation and tech innovation. There are a lot of CRMs out there. There are client relationship management databases. Now AI is coming along. Members want things on digital platforms. They don't read paper. They might not even be reading emails anymore. Like, how can we communicate, tell our story, grow engagement in ways that multiple generations can get access to? Also highly certain to impact the business and chamber communities, and it's going to have a lot of impact, right? The third thing, the idea of belonging and gathering. We have talked about it so many times, even since COVID, about this loneliness epidemic and how this is impacting, deaths of despair, people who become anxious and depressed and sometimes take their lives, turn to drugs and alcohol as a as self-medication. So this idea that belonging and gathering is going to certainly impact our business community, and the impact is going to be high. So we've got three clear, kind of like ding, 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 three clear winners. And then you've got three that are strong. And then this one, energy, on our shop, we call it energy, like the availability of energy, electricity, right? ACCE calls it resiliency, and they have kind of a bigger wrapper around what that means. But we've only had one client that we've tested that with. It was the Southern Ohio Chamber Association, and 88% of those folks said this is going to be very high impact, very high certainty. And I think if we had been able to add energy earlier in the process, we would have had other communities saying the same thing, because it's certainly turning up in every newspaper source across the country, right? So these are the things that our clients have said are high impact, high certainty. But as you know, knowing what's coming is not the same thing as being ready for it. So how ready is the business community for these high impact, high certainty forces? The thing to focus on here are the 4 boxes in pink. These are things that we say are high impact and high certainty, but our readiness is, it could be better. So how ready is the business community to step forward and be those catalytic leaders leading conversations? How ready are we to really embrace this digital transformation, try some things, pilot some things? This does include AI. Are we ready? Are we fit for purpose with our belonging and gathering game? Like, are we creating the kinds of events that people want to attend? Are we creating the kinds of engagement opportunities that people feel like we're a really good use of their time and we're really beneficial? And then finally, inclusive economic growth, right? Are we building a pie that's getting bigger for all people? So that was the results of our work kind of out in the wild since last August. But I presented this to a group of about 25 leaders at ACCE just yesterday. So this is hot off the press, Wednesday. This is hot off the press. And we asked them, of the top 6 high certainty, high impact forces and trends that our clients have said are the highest, how ready are you? And this is what those people in the room had to say. Now, this is important because these are people who have invested extra money in ACCE to help shepherd this Horizon investment. And you can see that for them, about 4 out of 10 said digital transformation and tech innovation is what we're least ready for. We're least ready for. Some of the other stuff we've kind of got on lock, or we've got a good handle on, but there was a clear winner in here, and it was about the use of technology, AI, et cetera, to build and change things. So now, as my signals and sense-making team has been thinking forward about the weak signals that we're starting to see on the margins, there are 3 buckets of weak signals that are worth sharing and worth thinking about. If you lead a business community, if you are a member of a business community, if you're an entrepreneur, these are things worth thinking about. So here's the first theme. Federal retreat, local exposure. I wanted to, Warren Buffett, I call him Uncle Warren. Warren Buffett has this famous saying that only when the tide goes out can you see who's wearing trunks, who's wearing a swimsuit, a swim costume. And I didn't want to show a photo of a guy wearing trunks. So instead I chose this idea of a glacier retreating and what they leave behind, what you can see after the glacier retreats. And this is getting at this idea that as the federal government is, in the United States, is stopping funding for certain things, they're stopping counting certain things. They're stopping counts on things like immigration, LGBTQ demographics. In fact, the weak signal that I'm bringing to my Signals and Sense Making group this week is about last week, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission said we're going to stop collecting demographic data about the number of women and people of color who are in executive ranks. So there's an ending of some counting, there's an ending of involvement in certain programs, and what's left is all of this local exposure. Now, counting is important, and I pointed this out in one of my articles earlier this year because it gives us a sense of transparency. Like, we're going to count things, we're going to share those counts with people so that we have something to sort of benchmark against. Well, when we don't have something to benchmark against, we don't know if we're doing well, if we're improving, if we're not. And that requirement to count is now being shuffled down to the local level. Like, you figure it out, local folks, or you figure it out, states, how and if you want to count. And there are a lot of times when counting makes sense. For example, as you know, because I had to cancel last week, I got a terrible virus 2 weeks ago. And the PA, the physician's assistant who I saw when I went into urgent care the first time, said, oh, we're seeing a ton of this. And I was like, is it in the data anywhere? There is no data that they're collecting about this. She's like, but here's what's going to happen. It's going to be, it's a normal virus, but it's going to take you 2 to 3 weeks to get over your laryngitis, for everything to clear. She's like, we're seeing it everywhere right now. I'm like, oh, okay. But it's anecdotal, right? It's not data driven. And there are times when you need data. I think something similar is happening with the foodborne illnesses coming through the lettuces. Like, we have reports of it, but we don't have hard data that is being collected and published. So it makes it hard to track things that matter. So that is sort of the first trend, is this withdrawal of how we collect and report data. The feds are withdrawing from that, and that is giving exposure to us on the local level, who have to solve the real problems where the rubber meets the road. Second theme, the need for belonging. So there are a series of weak signals that we've been collecting around this idea that people are coming out of their COVID caves, but it's awkward and they're trying to figure out how to do it. And it's creating this novel, sort of innovative opportunity. As an example, my colleague Ty brought a signal a couple of weeks ago about movie theaters that are becoming hosting venues, but not necessarily for movies. It could be for, Comic-Con. It could be for, a meet a filmmaker event. Maybe they show the film and then they meet the filmmaker. But that movie theaters are becoming more of like gathering places. We saw this during the World Cup, right? Where churches in Miami and in Los Angeles were hosting these World Cup viewing parties because they have these huge venues, often have huge screens, and let's face it, churches know how to throw a potluck, right? And so they were becoming these venues. So the way that we're thinking about our spaces and who comes into those spaces and how those spaces are used are beginning to show signs of innovation in a way that is really scratching the itch, especially for our next generations, and especially around areas of common interest. So this is the second kind of trend around business, belonging, and gathering. And the third thing is the idea of financial engineering. Several months ago, my signal of the week was about the number of young men and people overall who were participating in prediction markets and online gaming. And it's the fastest growing part of the US economy from 2019 to 2024. Online gaming and prediction markets are the fastest growing part of the economy from 2019 to 2024. And this is especially affecting our young men. in fact, the way that this week's signal came into my signals and sense making group, one of my colleagues, Lauren, who is in our sense making group, she has a friend who's a college president, and the college president reported to her that a number of young men who were enrolled as freshmen, sophomores, whatever, they were dropping out because they had spent all of their tuition money in online gaming, and they were broke. We know that when states make online gaming, open and accessible, when they kind of release the floodgates, bankruptcies start to go up in those states. So the point of all of this is that there's some financial engineering that's happening with our economy and with our markets that are really cracking at the foundation. That's hence the image, cracking at the foundation, especially of our youngest people, our young families. So the example that everyone knows is how unaffordable childcare is. And young families are being asked to pay for this, and in some cases making trade-offs of like, okay, one parent is not going to work because they have to stay home and take care of the kids. And every family should make the choice that they want. But as an economist, I look at that and I'm thinking like, man, if I've got two highly skilled parents, I want them both contributing to the economy, right? I don't want somebody to sit out because the cost of childcare has become unaffordable, but it's a cost that we're asking people to absorb. And the privatization of some of our public goods is causing further sort of cracking in the foundation. So, for example, the charter school movement and how we're using public money to pay for private schools, right? So in some communities now, it's like, well, I don't want to send my kid to public school, so I guess I'm going to pay $30,000 a year per kid, K-12, to send them to private school. Again, it's like transferring this burden onto individuals, onto young families. And this is where you're starting to see people just crumbling under the weight of this. The number of people who say, I'm not going to start a family and I'm not going to get married because I just simply cannot afford to do it. So we've even got clients who work in the public utility space who say, we can't afford to raise rates even 5%, 10%, because people are living on such a margin's edge with their finances because of inflation, because of the privatization of things that used to be public goods. So I used the example already of education, but healthcare as well, right? The number of private companies who are coming into home health, who are coming into nursing care, and it's privatizing a lot of things that we used to put our public money towards. So that's kind of a nutshell of how our business community is thinking about the forces and trends that are going to be most impactful. Again, they're seeing themselves as having to step forward and try to lead communities in the important conversations that communities need to have. They're seeing digital transformation and tech innovation as one of the things that is going to transform their businesses over the coming years. And those two things are things that they don't feel the most ready for. And then, of course, and I'm going to cheat and go back here. I want to take a quick look at what the third thing was. Yes, the idea of belonging and gathering, that we have to find new ways to engage folks. So those are the three things that the business community is telling us. And then I shared with you three themes that smart businesses should be paying attention to as they think about their futures. Now, it's time for what's on my desk. I'm going to have to show you this without turning the camera around because I'm broadcasting in a different way today. But my sister-in-law turned me onto these. That is cat grass. It's the happy grass that gets catnip. My sister-in-law turned me onto this. It's a little nest made out of corrugated cardboard that I don't have a cat in here right now because it would have affected your audio-video experience. But it's on the corner of my desk. Our cats love these things. If you have a pet who shares an office with you, always try to find a way to make them comfortable. You want your office to be a place that they can feel comfortable in as well. So that's honestly the biggest thing on my desk right now. And in terms of work, I'm just looking forward to getting back into it. I've been on the bench for a while, first with my wrist after my fall in the Arctic Circle, and then with this crazy virus and moving. So it's been hectic, but I'm looking forward to getting kind of back in the saddle. Now, for Try This at Home this week, I always try to leave you with one technique that you can use to build brighter futures. And this week, my try this at home technique is to listen to great music. Rebecca, what the heck does that have to do with building brighter futures? Well, when you listen to great music, it triggers something in your imagination. You know, like you can be transported, and maybe you have a feeling, or you have a series of feelings, and that can evoke a memory or a wish or something like this. And, you know, for me, I know that if we're going to build brighter futures, we need to have all of our imagination neurons firing. So if you can do things to fire your own imagination neurons, you should do those things, because we need all of your imagination to build brighter futures. And if you need a suggestion, and listen, this is the tricky thing about music, right? Something that I really enjoy, you might like want to barf in your shoe, but the music that I find myself turning to again and again when I need to downregulate and kind of widen my gaze and think a little bit more imaginatively, my favorite album recently is Brian Eno, E-N-O, and he's got it's going to sound crazy, he's got an album called Music for Airports. And this is my most played album of 2025. And there is just an ambience to it. There's a little bit of whimsy to it. There's some nobility to it. It has no lyrics. It's instrumental. Brian Eno is kind of in a class with Philip Glass in terms of music, but I feel like it's very evocative music. And if you've got time, the next time you're in the car doing pickup or whatever it is, put on some music that you really enjoy and let yourself imagine. All right, that's it for Friday, July 24th, Futures Friday. I'm Rebecca Ryan. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week.